and welcome to Fraud Busting Neofraus podcast. It is the only podcast for female fraud professionals and their allies who want to stay on top of the fraud awareness spectrum in order to thrive professionally while maximizing their happiness and having the courage to create the life they love. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Olga, and I'll be your host today for this podcast. Today we have a guest, Lauren Smith. She is an expert in mindfulness of dating. I specifically invited her to ask her a few important questions, especially related to romance scams. But before we do that, I'd like to give Lauren a floor for a bit and simply ask her to introduce herself. Hello, Lauren.
Hey, Olga. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be with everyone today to share my skills. I am a certified mindfulness and meditation teacher. I'm the author of the Mindful Dating Journal, which is a post-date tool that you can use to find a healthy love. And I'm also the host of the Date in Peace podcast.
Thanks so much, Lauren. That sounds definitely impressive and at the same time, truly, truly interesting. If you don't mind, we're gonna jump on to my first question for you today.
Let's do it.
All right. So, could you tell the audience, from the perspective of an expert in mindfulness of dating, what are your insights on the science of why singles are experiencing the need to date someone, even in situations such as circumstances of when the other person is unavailable, such as the scenarios with romance scams, because usually in those cases, the fraudster is presenting themselves being located physically in a different country. And so by that, becoming unavailable for the relationship with the victim. Thank you, Lauren, for in advance for answering that question.
Sure. I mean, as far as the science goes, when you start to feel attracted to someone, when you enter what's called the honeymoon phase of an early relationship, your brain chemistry changes. Your brain actually releases a blend of certain chemicals. They're feel-good chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline. And what this does is it makes you feel so good when you're with the person, but then when you leave them, or when you're not talking to them, or you're not texting them, that crash happens in your brain, and those chemicals aren't flowing anymore. So it's almost like you crave the next time you want to talk to them. You're literally addicted to those early communications. So the trouble is that when you're with someone that might be catfishing you and you don't know it, or they're making all these excuses for why they're not able to FaceTime you, or why they need to talk to you at certain times of the day that are really outside of your normal time zone schedule, we can make a lot of excuses for them because of those chemicals going off in our brain. It's a lot easier to fantasize and focus on how perfect everything could be so that you can continue to feel good. But if you want to really survive that honeymoon phase with a clear head, be grounded, and trust that you're going to be able to see that fraud or to see that catfishing, you have to be able to step back from those feel-good emotions and say, okay, I might feel good right now, but let me take a logical stock of all the data that I have, like get all the evidence that you can in the present moment, and see it as objectively as possible to think, what decisions can I make right now that are actually going to make me feel good later?
Lauren, thank you so much for providing all those insights. They're definitely important, for potential and actual victims of these scams, romance scams in particular. I'd like to ask you a quick question related to the first one. Why would you think those romance scams victims would be allowing themselves to seek a relationship, even if it's a distant one, even when the other person is unavailable? Would you think that that could be rooted also in their um, early life, early childhood life, or anything with that respect?
Yeah, sure. I got a story to tell you, and it was a doozy when I heard it. My mom is probably, I don't want to tell you exactly how old my mom is. She won't like me for doing that. But she's pretty, she's an elderly, oh my God, now she's really gonna hate me. She's
It's
a
okay.
mature woman, we'll say that. She went on these dating apps and she ended up chatting to a handful of men, and she ended up really narrowing it down to two men. And both of them were making her feel really great. They were complimenting her. They were telling her that, she's the most beautiful woman they've ever seen. But they strangely both had accents and they had excuses, not even excuses. They had really good explanations for why they had accents. Like you meet an American like yourself, you have an accent, there's nothing suspicious about that, But so my mom had no questions in her mind when these accents came in. But it turns out that a lot of catfishing scams, that is one of the characteristics that they have in common. The next thing that was a little suspect is that there was always excuses for why they couldn't do a video call. Like, oh, my daughter's got to play, or I had a really long day at work, I'm stuck at the office. Always excuses. So that's another red flag. The next one is they would only ever text her first thing in the morning, or like right when my mom was about to go to bed. So it was very inconsistent. It was very inflexible. And it eventually was discovered that my mom, in one of the photos that they were sending back and forth, because they still sent pictures. So these guys, they're really good at what they do. They have done this with so many women that they know what are the tactics that work. They have probably a database full of photos that they can use, that they can send. And what happened was, in one of the videos that he ended up sending her, it was like a pre-recorded video, there was a flash of a second where you could see that whoever this man was that this data was stolen from, he had a wedding ring on. And my mom freaked out. She was like, oh my God. And that's when it sort of started to fall into place for her. And when she was able to say, like, okay, there was a lot of little fishy things going on, and I kept making excuses for him. But when she saw that wedding ring, it was like the blinders were off. She started to see everything for what they were. So she went online, and there are some websites that you can use. You can upload those photos that they're sending you if you're suspicious of like whether or not they might actually be catfishing you. You put that photo up and it will search the database, because people report this and those photos go in there. So they know these people, they're using the same photos over and over again. So in the effort of my mom trying to find this guy to find out whether or not he was catfishing her, she did not find him. She ended up finding the other guy that she was talking to that whole time. So my poor mom was being catfished at the same time by two different guys. But it was a really beautiful lesson for her, and for me as well, to be able to pass this knowledge along to you in what we can do to stop this right away, because it is really hard. My mom wanted to believe that she found somebody. She wanted to believe that there was someone out there that thought she was beautiful. And to answer your question, it did have a lot to do with her childhood. Our parents love us as the best they can. They do everything that they can within their power to meet our needs. But there was some time in my mom's life as a little girl where she felt like she wasn't quite good enough, that she wasn't quite beautiful enough, or that she wasn't totally worthy of being loved by someone. So when these people came around and acted like the Prince Charming of her dreams, and all she had to do was just send a text every once in a while, yeah, that sounds amazing, But what happened is that my mom ended up having a rude awakening and seeing that there were some things that she could have done right away to notice if it's a catfish. And that's demanding a video call, live video FaceTime call. It's and yeah, there's some other things too that she can do along the way.
Lauren, thank you so much for the story about your mom, which is a real, true crime story, and I'm glad that it didn't turn into an actual scam. That's amazing. But also, thank you so much for answering the important question that the victims themselves might be, consciously or subconsciously looking for a relationship, even if it's distant because of some other circumstance from their early childhood life or anything related to that. Um, I'd like to ask you another question for seeking an advice from you as an expert. What would you recommend uh, potential victims out there, but people in general, to have sort of like a personal strategies in order not to become easy victims of romance scams?
Sure, I would recommend keeping your emotions in equal balance with your reasoning mind. So we mentioned before that when you get really excited that you're going to meet someone and you think, oh, maybe this is my person, my soulmate that I've been waiting for, your emotions combined with those neurochemicals that are being released, you start to fantasize and you focus on all the beautiful things that could be. It's almost like a false hope. And at the same time, you're pushing away some hard truths that you really don't want to face. So if you want to make healthier decisions, you have to actively call that logic back up to the surface, which is hard because we're humans, we want to feel good. So what I would recommend is making space before or after a date to journal. Just the process of journaling makes you think a little bit differently, use your brain a little bit differently. It's calling up that logic. And that's your opportunity to ask questions like, what are some red flags, really? Like it's hard to spot the red flags, especially when you have that cocktail of chemicals of making you feel really good emotionally. But take the time to sit there and try to be like a Sherlock Holmes of your own love life. No judgments. You're just going to be mindfully accepting of everything that's going on. And then once you have all the data, that's when you can make a wiser choice that you can trust.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That's a wonderful advice, for potential victims, but also audience in general. It was such a great pleasure having you on my podcast today. Thanks so much for the participation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Olga.
And thanks everyone for listening. Stay healthy and happy. Bye-bye.